Hello, and welcome back to 13 Days of Walking the Witch's Path. I hope you had an opportunity yesterday to sit quietly and listen to the path working down the rabbit hole. My hope was that this would offer you an opportunity to meet yourself in another space and to also see the beauty of yourself within a space that would normally be considered dark, hidden, and cloaked from the world. Today, what I'd like to share with you are some thoughts on the magical self, what that self is, how it is used and developed in magical practice, and what can evolve from learning to develop that persona in using it also in your mundane endeavors as well. The magical self is a concept that when we engage in magical work, when we enter sacred space, we are bringing into that space or that working pieces and parts of ourself that relate and resonate directly with the divine. This persona, as it is also known, is developed through the work that you have done in your spiritual practice, your personal work, as well as the work that you have done along the way in learning to know a little bit more about who and what you are. As you begin this process of peeling back the layers, kind of like an onion, of the divine that resides within you, then you also begin to build outer emanations of what that persona is and what the true energetic signature or stamp of you as a unique person is in the etheric, in the astral, and in the magical worlds. Just like each of us has our own unique signature when we sign important documents, the same is true when we are doing magical workings. Now, you don't have to actually consciously try to develop this magical persona, because to a large degree, as you begin to deepen your work, as you begin to understand more about who you are in that work, to some degree, those layers begin to build, and that image, that signature, begins to change within you, and you begin developing what would normally be considered a magical persona. The thing is that if you actively are engaged in collaboratively working towards building that, it will be a process that will also inform you as you move along the steps of what is actually occurring. So rather than it being a transparent thing that happens, it will actually be something that you are actively engaging in and causing to happen. Now, the magical persona is the you that as you enter, let's say, sacred space, you cross that threshold. You leave the mundane world behind, and you are preparing yourself to engage in work that is between the worlds, both the astral, the physical, and all the planes that reside within those various layers that we call doing work between the worlds. As you step through that threshold and step into that space, as the energy of the space is drawn into a coalescent form, pieces and parts of you begin to resonate. Your energy begins to change in accord with the energy that is moving around you. And it is not unusual, especially in ritual where you have other people there as well who can be observers. It's not unusual after everything is done and ended for someone to come up and say to you, wow, you looked vastly different in that space than you look to me right now. Sometimes you may appear taller or thinner or even have different color hair, just look completely different. That is your magical essence, that is your magical persona being shown in that space. It also is a way to identify yourself to those deities that you may be working with or calling. So, for instance, those deities and those patrons that I have, that I work with, in addition to having a magical name, which I'll talk to you about in a little bit, in addition to having a magical name, when I sit down to do the work or enter ritual space or however it is that I'm choosing to engage with those deities, I quiet myself for a moment and I draw up all of the energy that is the preparation that I put into who I will become when I enter into that working. So that as I am calling out to my patrons or those deities, they recognize me, because you have to also remember they live in an entirely different realm than we do. And just as the information we receive from them is filtered through the storehouse of imagery and symbology that we have accumulated, the reverse is also true. So to them, we have a specific energetic signature that if you work with them routinely enough, they begin to recognize that as being you, as it is the person who I have engaged with before, and they are now calling or asking me for assistance again. So that's one way that you can use the magical persona. The other way is as you are creating sacred space and opening up the quarter gates of the elements and calling in those specific energies that reside in the elemental gates of earth, air, fire, and water, you are sending out a beacon. You are sending out a stream or a strand of yourself that, again, is your magical signature, your energetic stamp. So that if you are calling to similar beings that you have called to or similar energies that you routinely have called to before, it will be kind of taking the shortcut to get to them versus having to go through all of the filters and parameters that would be done for someone who's not sending out that beacon that is recognizable and energetically shows up on whatever type of mapping these beings have for us. I mentioned something about a magical name. This is something that I believe dates back to the Egyptian pantheon, the idea of the name or the word Ren, which was what the Egyptians called your name. There was a name that you were given that was your secret name. It was not the name that was used in everyday interactions. In fact, you and deity were the only ones who knew that name. The intention or thought behind that was that if an individual actually were able to somehow obtain your Ren or your real name, that they would have ultimate power over you, that they would be able to enchant you, they would be able to ask of you whatever they wished, and you would have no choice but to acquiesce to whatever those askings were. This was actually something that occurred in the myth of Osiris and Isis, and part of the magic or the Hekal that Isis used in helping to find and retrieve the bits and pieces of Osiris's body, in that she obtained the magical and secret name of one of the gods, and by using that name, exerted power over that particular deity and was able to ask and make request that was enabled her to much more readily find and accomplish what she needed. The magical name is one that you may search for. It may be one that is given to you from the inner planes, meaning that it's not something that you would necessarily be given at the time of an initiation by another human being, but meaning that perhaps you're in a meditation, perhaps you're in a magical working, and the deity or the beings that you're working with call you by a name. The magical name is something that you can sit contemplatively and seek out. Often in the very beginnings, most people will select a magical name that also gives reference to some of the attributes that either they feel they possess or some of the attributes that they would like to possess. So, for instance, one of my first magical names was Amethyst Breed. I chose amethyst because it is my birthstone, and I also love the qualities and the nature of amethyst. It is a stone of great serenity. It is a stone of healing. It is a stone that relates to the highest spiritual realms. And those were my goals, to have a personality and a countenance that would be serenity and would be healing. And also because I wanted to gain access to those higher spiritual realms as well as the realms within myself. The second name, Breed, is actually also named Bridget. You may be more familiar with that. The spelling I used was B-R-I-G-H-I-D, and in traditional Gaelic, it is pronounced Breed. At that time, one of my patrons was the goddess Breed, and being a triune goddess of the flame, the forge, also creativity, inspiration, wisdom, these were also attributes that I was hoping to hone. I love to write, so I was hoping for that creative inspiration. I am very mind-oriented, very much air in my predisposition, so I wanted to also add some more active fire to that in helping to create and stimulate this creative nature. And I also had 5 very small children at the time, and I was interested in herbs and using them for healing modalities. So she seemed like a perfect namesake. So my first magical name was Amethyst Breed. And in choosing that name, I was hoping that I would embody those qualities that I had chosen. I have a second magical name, which is known to my coven members. And then I actually have a third magical name, which is more of my personal Ren, if you will, that is only known to myself and to those inner plane teachers and deities that I work with. When I use that name for my personal work, that is how they know me. That is how they respond to me. And even when I am in public ritual, if I am calling to or opening the gates or creating sacred space or doing magical working, I don't have to say that name out loud. Quite frankly, all I have to do is just breathe, and as I'm breathing, send the vibration of that name out without it being audible, because the hearing is much more acute as you're moving through the various realms. Or I just have to be thinking about the fact that I am embodying that name. Now, that might seem a little excessive, having the 3 names. The Amethyst Breed I use for my Facebook and my public work as an alternative to what my mundane name is. And so I've kept that, even though it doesn't really fit quite as well as far as who and what I have become. The second name is useful because it's known by my coven members. Each of our coven members also has their own magical names. And it's a way for us, when we are engaging in magical work, to set ourselves together energetically, each of us connecting to those higher pieces within ourselves, and then enabling all of that as a collective whole to bring into the ritual space and the ritual working all of those things that are of support and help in a divine nature to us individually, and blending and merging so that they can help us collectively. And as I said, the third magical name is only for my personal work. Now, what I'd like to share with you also is the fact that as you move forward in this path, or really any spiritual path, it's not a witch's path or a pagan path where people often will take another name that is more in alignment with what their spiritual being is. It's not uncommon in many of the Eastern traditions for someone to also take another name that is more in accord with perhaps a deity, or in Sanskrit that is representative of their energy. You'll see that all the time if you look on iTunes and you're looking at some of the artists who are representational of some of the Zen and the yoga and, some of the tracks of the yantras and mantra work. You will see that all the time. And it's not unusual in many of the other spiritual traditions as well to take another name. In the Catholic faith, if you're given another name that is in alignment with one of the Catholic saints or one of the preeminent individuals within that faith, as well as having your mundane on either side of it. So that's not an unusual concept. My suggestion would be that if you are choosing to select a magical name for yourself, that you even look through correspondences, sit down and think about those things within the craft that particularly call to you, which is why sometimes when you go on the internet and you see different Wiccan blogs and pages and everything, you might see someone who's named Mooncat. You might see someone who is named Starfeather. You might see someone who is named Hecate's spirit or anything like that. And it is okay to take a name of a deity as well, if that particular deity is one whose archetypal and anthropomorphic energy you resonate with. I would caution you to stay away from names that lock you into something that you completely are not. That's not to say that you may not evolve towards using that name, but remember, whatever name you choose aligns with the magical persona and is part and parcel of that magical persona that you are developing. So if you, for instance, if you know that perhaps you are someone who wants to develop a magical persona that is a bit more courageous than you in your mundane life are, a persona that is not afraid to speak up on behalf of themselves or on behalf of another, then as you are building up that persona, as you are gathering the confidence and the courage within you, then you may want to choose a name that represents that process of building up, not necessarily the full-blown product that you think could be the potential. So, for instance, if you are rather mild-mannered and you're working on becoming much more assertive in your dealings, I would not particularly choose Morrigan as part of your name. The Morrigan, Sekhmet, Kali, all of those particular deities are very, very potent and strong in their avenging nature. That's not to say that there is not a gentleness that is there, but it is much more a jarring, much more of a cutting away that, whether you want it or not, often will occur. Perhaps instead, something better to choose would be actually choosing something that surrounds the name lion. Now that might seem like an odd choice, but a lion is one who steps into the pride, and the lion who is the head of that pride is also and has to be very courageous in their actions. There is discernment in when and where they will strike the blow. It's not necessarily that I'm saying it's a gentle nature, but it is something that also at a human level, we are very familiar with what lions, the animal lions, how they operate, how they move, what their motivations are, what their primal instincts are. And one of their first and foremost primal instincts is protection and guarding of their pride, of their group, of their tribe, their community, however you want to look at that. So in you, who may consider yourself to be a bit timid, trying to build that up, it might be a nice way in that you will also be giving a nod and attention to the fact that as you are becoming more courageous, as you are learning how to become stronger and more assertive in your energies, that you will also do it for the right reasons. That you won't just be calling onto yourself a mantle and a visage that you can't really uphold, because deep down in, that's really not who you are. We can be warrior-like, we can be courageous, we can be brutal when we need to be. But because we are also human, and there is the humanity that's in that piece as well, we also have to have discernment so that we are not reckless and we are not brutal for no other reason than simply to exert our will. So when you are choosing a magical name, you want to bring into that process even the steps that go into the process of what you might finally settle on. So that also means that just simply because you choose a magical name doesn't mean that you are forever locked into that name. You will change and you will grow. And as you change and as you grow, you might find that you outgrow that name, and that's fine. Or in other cases, you might find that you were drawn to such a powerful name to begin with that offered so much flexibility and differing qualities that that name will last you throughout this entire lifetime on your path as a witch and inform all of your actions that you are engaging in. The magical names can be a process where, if you wish, you can actually formally dedicate yourself to that. It does not have to be a big ritual, a big ceremony. It can be simply sitting quietly. I would recommend having a pen and a piece of paper. Computers I love, typing I love. But there are some things that need the imbuement of your own physical energy. That there's nothing like streaming that energy through a pen onto a sheet of paper as you are writing out your magical name. By now, if you've also gotten a journal, as I had recommended, that would be a lovely place to put your magical name, to sit quietly, perhaps light a candle that is representative as you're lighting it of this light, this new light that is developing within you. Take your pen, take your paper, breathe deeply into it, and as you say your name aloud, write it down on one of the pages in your journal. After you've written it down, sit for a moment. Look at the beautiful shape that name makes, because each letter and the letters combined together are going to create a beautiful pattern that eventually could become a sigil or a talisman for you that you can use in some way. Just sit for a moment. Look at the beauty of it. Look at how it flows onto the page. Look at what you have created for yourself. So that's the magical names. As you develop through your magical name, as you become more aligned and more in accord with what that name means to you, so make it meaningful to you. That's the important thing. Not what you think other people want you to be. It has to be what you feel you wish to be and what you wish to exemplify in all of your workings. That becomes aligned with the magical self or the magical persona that you are, as a co-creator with that name and with yourself. You are developing that as well. The magical persona will grow, it will expand, it will change. Change is a good thing. It can be painful, it can be joyous, but change is absolutely necessary, particularly along this witch's path. We are ones who manipulate, who control the energy that affects change, not only within ourselves, but outside of ourselves. In order to successfully affect that change, we have to expect that the biggest change is going to originate within ourselves, so that then we have the energy to cast it out to the world, and make the positive impacts that we need, or make the negative impacts that we need. You see, it's all a matter of free will and free choice. The semantics of good and bad, negative and positive, often get convoluted and confusing. In witchcraft, there is no black magic and white magic. It's all the same magic. It really is just a matter of the choice of the practitioner as what the goal and what the intention is, meaning that there is what would be considered dark magic that can be used for very positive end results. And there is what would be considered perhaps magic that is more of the light, that can be used in an extraordinarily negative way that produces nothing but chaos and mayhem. So try not to keep those things just simply lingering on what our culture has taught us darkness is and light is. And hopefully, again, if you had a chance to sit and listen to the pathwork, and you see that we have to periodically move ourselves into the dark spaces. The only way we know that there is light is because we know that there is darkness. And conversely, the same works. With the magical persona, this allows us to move in the worlds in between with a strong and clear energetic signature of who and what we are. It means that at that point, when we are allowing our magical persona to be revealed, we have stripped away everything that is of limit in doing the astral and the ephemeral work that is of the corporeal within us. We have stripped that away to leave the bare bones essentials of the pure essence of who and what we are. And we can think of our corporeal form for that time being as being the scaffolding that holds it all together. It's not that it completely goes away. It actually becomes the scaffolding that helps to support, and in some cases, when we really become adept, and the magical persona is one that as soon as we cross that threshold, or as soon as we even think about doing the work of magic, immediately integrates within us. When that integration occurs, our corporeal self at that point actually becomes the pedestal upon which we stand as we reach up into the highest and the heights of what our divine self in connection with and in relationship to the divine itself truly is. Breathing into this work is of utmost importance. I'm going to talk a little bit about that more in one of the later posts or videos that I do. But I want you to always remember to breathe, not just for the fact that obviously as physical beings we need to breathe, but as you become more embedded in this path, as you walk deeper into the witch's path and into the woods that are unknown, don't let your breathing become shallow. Let your presence be known. If anything, I want you to breathe more deeply and more fully than you ever believed you could. Because a basic concept is that energy follows awareness, and that awareness is cultivated first and foremost in our breathing. As soon as we begin to breathe, we become aware of ourselves as a living, breathing organism. And as soon as we establish that awareness, that's when the magic begins. That's when the energy within us changes, and that's when the energy and the magical persona, and in conjunction with identifying ourselves with our newfound magical name, really take us into a space that we are both masters of, and that we have also created, and that we also are interaction and in dialogue with everything else that inhabits it. I wish you a blessed day, and I'll see you tomorrow.